Russian border. Bathurst and Steeles is like Moscow.
That's right, indeed. Okay, so they should have safe travels and safe passage.
Yeah. No, no, I have my one couple coming from Lakewood. They weren't gonna come and they decided we're gonna go. We're gonna come. So
Everyone wants.
actually I sent my son-in-law shopping. It's
No,
unbelievable.
but it's more than that. In Lakewood, they're giving out. The government's giving out food packages to every family,
Right.
and there's so much stuff that they give out. It's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of free groceries going on over there.
And
Okay,
even
so let's
and
see the
even
Gemara. So,
okay,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Yesterday we discussed a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish as to how far we go when we refuse to accept anything, any donations to the Beis Hamikdash or to the Mishkan from a Kusi and from a Goy. And Rish Lakish said we don't accept anything at all. The only thing that a Goy can give is a carbon of Nadava. The other exception was if he's giving something with the intent of it being like a carbon Nadava, such as paying for the flour for the mincha that will accompany his carbon oila, or if he's giving money towards a vow of an erechin, where he doesn't know it's going to be the kabbalah, his intention is just to give it as an adava to something that he thinks would be consumable, then it's allowed to be diverted to the Beda Kabbayis, because he's not giving it to the Beda Kabbayis directly, and therefore he won't have that attitude that it, I have a piece of the Beis Hamikdash, because he thinks he's just giving it as a consumable offering, and that was the exception that Rish Lakish allowed. So we're up to the second line, the third line of Dav Dalet Amud Beis. Chizkiya Omer Rab Simon Shoal, and we already learned what Shoal means, and the Takla Chadtin actually reminds us because he knows that we're in very foreign territory. So he says, the Takla Chadtin says, Perishis Beresh Mechilton, listen to Shoal. I don't get frustrated and tell you, why are you asking me the same question again? I already told you. He patiently tells us that I already told you at the beginning of the Mesafta that Shoal doesn't mean he has a question. Shoal means this is my opinion. I just want to hear what you think about it. So based on what we're learning from how strict Rish Lakish is about accepting anything, you wouldn't even be able to accept money from a goy to fix the drainage system or the walls of the city. Good morning. We
Morning.
thought that you were in transit.
Not yet.
We were just learning that Reb Chizkiya takes Rish Lakish's strict approach to not allowing any donations coming from Goyim to the Beis Hamikdash. He also says, based on Rish Lakish's strict interpretation of the pasuk, "Lo lechem v'lodnu livnos beis Elokeinu," you wouldn't even be able to accept money from them to repair the drainage systems and the water canals and the fortresses of the city. Al Shem Shenemar, because the next pasuk adds even more prohibition. And if we look at the psukim inside, the first pasuk was Vayamon Zerubbabel v'Yeshua Shor Rashi Avos Yisrael Lo Lechem V'Lo Livnos Beis Elokeinu Kanachnu Yachad Nivneh Hashem Elokei Yisrael Kashetzivan HaMelech Koresh Melech Pros. So only we're going to build. No one's going to help us. And then it goes weiter. Hashem will help us. Us, Hashem's servants, Nokam Uvaninu, we will build the Beis Hamikdash. Vilachem ein chelek utstaka v'zikaron Yerushalayim. You're not even going to have anything to do at all with Yerushalayim either. So it extends the prohibition not only to not taking donations for the Beis Hamikdash, but even for municipal improvements and municipal maintenance in the city of Yerushalayim, they wouldn't accept anything from them either. It's almost like when they built the state of Israel. I hope I don't get shot for this. I remember, like, even the deep sea ports, everything, all the labor they were makbid to do only with Yidden, because they wanted to be completely autonomous. They wanted to show that they could build a nation without any help. And it was only Jewish that built the deep port and all the other things. It's funny, that didn't last too long. And now we're always reliant upon foreign labor, but at least when the state was established, I think it was exclusively with Jewish labor. Am I mistaken, or is that factually correct?
I don't know about that, but I can tell you that the first Beis Hamikdash, Shlomo's Beis Hamikdash, was built with a lot of help from Hiram, Melech, I forgot, just north of Eretz
Right, that was the
Yisrael.
first Beis Hamikdash. That's right, the
Yeah.
first Beis Hamikdash. But the second Beis Hamikdash was done exclusively by the Jews for the Jews. Because all these psukim are all referring to when they were returning back from Babel.
I think there was help from Kairosh or whoever the king
Well, it
of.
seems like Koresh let them build it. Did he actually contribute as well?
I've read that he contributed to it, but I don't know if it's true. But that's
If he was Jewish, then he would be allowed. If he wasn't Jewish, it would be a problem. You know, it could be like the thing is, it's a lost bone.
It's lost what?
Lost bone. It's a lost bone.
Yeah.
It's a lost bone on my house. I mean, I let someone do it for me.
All right.
Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. The Taklon Chadatin skips the Girsa and skips this whole line, and he goes to weiter. Masnisa der Meir. In the next Gemara, we're going to have some Girsa issues. Masnisa der Meir, and this is where the article can come in very handy because you don't have to go back and forth from here to there to look at the Girsa. The article just quotes it very nicely. Masnisa der Meir. The Amr of Meir. When Kishem Sheshiklai Torah, Kach Kalboin Torah. The Meir who holds that two people who share in the cellar have to give two Kalboinos. Now, if it's just because of the extra pay, because of the transfer, because of the currency exchange, then one Kalboin should be enough if we're both together giving the Machzor Shekel in one cellar. But Meir mandates that you have to give two. Why is that? Because he holds Kishem Sheshiklai Torah, just like Midairaisa. There's a din shekel, Kach Kalboin Torah, so too the Chiyuv to give the Kalbons at the Raisa. So when it says Osher Lo Yarbe, it means Lo Yarbe from the shekel plus the extra Kalboin. Where does Reb Meir get this from? Zok to Gemara, Kasover Reb Meir b'noisen shikloi shalem. Even if you give an individual shekel, so there's no exchange fee at all because you actually have the precise coin required. Nevertheless, shu chayiv b'kalboin, you're still going to be chayiv in the kalboin. Where did he get that from? Reb Meir said, "Kimin matbeya shal eish hotzi hakadosh baruch hu mitachas kisei kavoday." Hashem took a matbeya fire from under his kisei hakavod, the herayu leMoshe, and he showed it to Moshe. And he told him, "Zeh, this is exactly what you have to give yitnu, kazeh yitnu." Meaning, I'm makbid that it should be exactly like this. So if it's missing even a mashu, there's a problem. So better throw in a little bit of extra, so it's like a baker's dozen. So this way, we know for sure you would have given the zeh, the exact dimion of the coin that the Rebbeinu Shalom identified. Let's just quickly have a look in the Taklon Chadatin. Besovely, he holds me the Kapit Hashem. Since HaKadosh Baruch Hu was makbid, the Her Eyu Kimin Matbeya Shel Eish, he showed him a sample of this coin. And he said, Kazeh Yitnu. What the Torah means to teach us, what the Rebbeinu Shalom meant to convey to Moshe, was Hainu Shelo Yugra Lo Olam Mimachta Shekel Shahay B'nei Moshe. There should never be a drop diminished from the shekel, from the Machzor Shekel that was in the time of Moshe. When you come in Zeh Yitnu, you see that the Rebbeinu is fixated on this very specific amount. Therefore, b'deraisa chayiv litein l'kol chati shekel matbeik tana, a little extra lehecher, just to be 100% sure.
Doesn't kus mean approximately? We have that. Yes.
Maybe approximately a little more, not approximately, but a little less. So it's very interesting because there's a lot of Torah on Matpeh Shalish. Why couldn't Rabbi Shalom have showed him what the Matpeh looked like in silver? What's type of Shalish? So the Ger Rebbe says that the Rabbi Shalom wanted to teach Klal Yisrael that when you do a mitzvah, so therefore, and even when you're giving money away, that's what the Ger Rebbe says. And we had earlier, I don't remember when we learned this last time at Beis Shalish, at the end of Tachim, I think, I saw from somebody who said that Hashem wants to show you that a coin is like fire. Fire is a necessary thing in life. You can't cook, can't produce anything. You need fire to do everything. On the other hand, even though fire is the most productive force, fire is also the most destructive force. And therefore, the Rebbe Shalom is showing money is good. Don't think money is a bad word. I once heard a fundraiser saying that. He said, money is not a four-letter word. It's a very kosher word. But that's provided that it's used properly. If not, it can be very, very destructive. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Nosan Sela Litel Shekel. So let's go back to the Mishnah just to get our bearings as to what was going on with the cases in the Mishnah. So I'm going back to the Mishnah on Dalet Amud Aleph. And the Mishnah says, Bim Shakal al Yodoi, some 4 lines from the top of the Amud on Dalet Amud Aleph. Bim Shakal al Yodoi val Yad Chavei, right? What if I gave one seller that had 2 machzos shekels in it, and that was going to pay for myself and for my friend? I wasn't sponsoring. This is something that he'll pay me back. So he is chayiv a Kalboin if he would be giving on his own. Chayiv a Kalboin echad. Since we're giving together, I'm only chayiv in 1 Kalboin. Reb Meir Amar base Kalbonis. So we just need to clarify where this comes from. Why does Reb Meir hold its base Kalbonis? We learned the Kazeh, and the Chachamim hold you only need 1. So what we explained in the Mishnah, the Talmud Chacham explained in the Mishnah, the reason why if 2 people are giving their coin together, they have to give a Kalboin, is because if I would have given a seller, I still need the conversion to happen to 2 machzos shekels. So therefore, this 1 Kalboin that we're giving is the exchange fee to make the 1 seller into 2 shkolim. And just because you're giving it to Hektish shouldn't be any worse than if you went to an independent money exchange service to ask him to break you the seller into 2 shkolim. So the same way you would give that Kalboin to a private money exchange service, you give that to the Hektish as well. That's the Chacham. The Meir held you the 2 Kalbonis. 1, because he agrees with the Chachamim that there's that exchange fee. The second one is the Kazeh that we just learned, how Reb Meir darshans the pasuk, that your Rebbe wants to make sure that it'll be for sure the entire machzos shekel. It shouldn't be missing a drop. So therefore, you have to give a drop more. So the 1 Kalboin can actually suffice for both people giving, because if the coin was diminished a drop, the 1 Kalboin will be able to fill in the deficit of both coins. So the reason why Reb Meir holds there's 2 Kalboinis is 1, because he's agreeing to the Chachamim that you need to add a Kalboin to pay the exchange fee, and the second one is what we just learned, which is that you also need to make sure that you're not giving even a drop less than the full shekel, and therefore you need 2. So that explains the machlokes Reb Meir and the Chachamim. Now we have to go to the next case and see how the chips fall here. Hanoisen sela v'noitel shekel. You're giving only for yourself, but you don't have a half a shekel. So you give Hektish a sela and you ask for change. So you're giving him a sela and you're getting back a shekel. So there, chayiv shnei kalbonos. You're chayiv 2 kalbonos. So this is a little bit mysterious as to why that would be. Is it because he holds like Reb Meir, and then there's not really much of a difference between the last case and this case? Or maybe it's even according to the Chachamim, but then why would you need 2 kalbonos? You're just doing an exchange. So that's what the Gemara is going to probe right now. So let's see the Gemara. Back on Dalet Amud Beis, the Gemara says as follows. Not Nosan Sela Litoel Shekel. So you gave a seller and you wanted change, you wanted a shekel. So the Mishnah says Chayiv Shnei Kalbonos. So who is this going like, and what is the reason for this? Omer Rabbi Lezer, the Reb Meir, it's going according to Reb Meir. The Tanya Elu chayavin bekalboin, like we learned a moment ago. The Chacham say Kalboin echad if two people are giving a seller together. Rav Meir Omer beis kolbanos. So this is no different than the case before. You have to give one Kalboin for the exchange fee, and you have to give a second Kalboin to ensure that you're giving a little bit more than what's required because it says Kazayit. Umar Rav divrei HaKohavi. But Rav learned that this is even according to the Chacham. And this is where the Girsa changes. If you have the art scroll, you can look on the English side. But if the art scroll didn't make up his own Girsa, the art scroll is just using the Girsa that the Taklin Chadatin uses and skips out Reb Meir. Because we're trying to say Divrei HaKohavi, it's even going according to the Chachamim, and he skips out the words the Omer Reb Meir. And I'm going to quickly just look at the Dibra Maskal of the Taklin Chadatin, which is exactly how the art scroll goes. Rav Omer Divrei HaKohavi, Echot shekel shu noising, the echot shekel shu noitel. So let's just look back. He just skipped out the Rav Meir, because in fact we're trying to argue now that this is even according to the Chachamim. Echot shekel shehu noising, the echot shekel shehu noitel. The reason why even according to Chachamim you're going to need two kolboinos is one for the shekel that he's taking and one for the shekel that he's giving. The Taklin Chadatin explains that you actually split this transaction into two transactions. Because in fact, I'm doing two things. A is I'm giving a half a shekel to hektish out of 1 shekel. So if I owed somebody a half a shekel, if I owed somebody the machzah shekel, and I didn't have that exact denomination, and I gave him a full selah, so he would have to give me change. But since he's giving me change, he's entitled to an exchange fee. So therefore, he's going to charge me a Kalboin. The other thing is, what if I'm just changing up? I'm asking him to change me 1 selah for 2 shkolim. Once again, I'm going to be charged an exchange fee. Even though these two transactions are happening simultaneously, so if you were doing this with a private exchange, you would only have to pay 1 Kalboin. Here, since it's hektish, we split the transactions. We look at it like it's 2 transactions for the benefit of hektish, and that's why even according to the Chachamim, we mandate an extra Kalboin. A little difficult to understand, but we're always looking for ways, it seems, to multiply these transactions to the benefit of hektish. So therefore, even according to the Chachamim, you would need 2 Kalboinos. Let's see the Taklin inside. It's a long one, but we'll go through it quickly. Rav Omer Divrei HaKohavi, echot shekel shu noisin, v'echot shekel shu noitel. Svirlei, the gam Tanakama moida bazeh. Even the Tanakama will be moida in this case, the chayiv beis kolboinos. V'loi domi l'shokel al yodoi val yad chaveroi. It's not similar to the case immediately prior in the Mishnah, where the Chachamim hold dein chayiv el achas. Why? The hasam shneim noisnin chayiv beis shekleim b'sela. They're both giving in that 1 selah. They're both giving it, and they're both going to. There's no exchange being done. If they would want to go to a private guy to split that selah into 2 shkolim, all they would have paid a private vendor was 1 kalboin, and therefore and therefore you could treat hektish the same way you would treat a private vendor. They mafsid and mistaken, but they don't. Since hefsid is not losing, since hektish is not losing, hektish won't make more money than a regular vendor would. Mashenk and hacha, where we're going to split it into 2 transactions. Let's say I was going to a private vendor and I was going to get change of a seller so that I can have 2 half a shekels and one of them I would give to hektish. I would have to pay that exchange fellow a kalboin for his services. And the same thing, if I ever wanted to get change of a shekel from a seller when I was paying, I would also have to give a kalboin. Therefore, in this case, we're being mechayiv 2 kalboinos because I'm doing an exchange to my ilu shekel l'shulchani. Let's say I was chayiv a shekel to the shulchani. When I'm coming to pay back the shulchani, I didn't have a shekel. I only had a selah. so I would need change. Then, even though I'm paying my choiv, since he's splitting my money for me and he's taking $1 and giving me back 50 cents, I would have to pay him a kalboin. So that's one transaction. Additionally, if I was asking to change up money, to give me a shekel from a seller, I would also have had to have given him this bonus. We're going to treat hekdesh like hedget, and we treat it like two transactions, even though in real life, if you do these things simultaneously, you wouldn't pay, but we're going to give hekdesh the benefit of making that extra kalboin. If I was asking you just to give me 2 shekalim for a seller, I would have to be a kalboin. And if I owed you a shekel, and I only had a seller, and I gave you the seller, and you're giving me change, I'd also pay a kalboin. So there's 2 things happening here, although they're happening at the same time. It's really one transaction. But for the benefit of hekdesh, we split it and we look at it like 2. Right, so I'm paying you. I'm looking to pay off a choy. I'm looking to pay you a shekel, and I'm giving you a seller, and I'm asking you for change. That's transaction number 1. Well, that's not the transaction I'm referring to now. Now I'm referring to a transaction where I owe you a shekel, I give you a seller, and I ask for a shekel back change. So there you're going to charge me money. It's like Visa; they get you everywhere, right? And we also look at it like I'm just going to an independent exchange guy. I don't owe him any money, and I'm giving him a seller, and I'm asking for 2 shekels back. And again, I got to pay. Now here they're happening at the same time. But we're at this point, the Gemara learns, Rabbi is learning that the Chum holds that for the benefit of hekdesh, you'll look at it like 2 transactions. It's a little difficult to understand, but that's what it is. It took me a long time to chew it over until it settled in my mind, because that's exactly how I reacted. I'm not looking at you like you're crazy. I understand exactly what you're saying. If you tell yourself something enough times, it starts to make sense. Zok to Gemara weiter. So he learns. So Rab learns divrei koili echad shekel shu noitzin v'echad shekel shu noitel. No, the echad of it doesn't go here because we're talking about the chachamim. But al daitai there have mayor. So you could see how the gears is again changed. Al daitai there have mayor. If you take this thought pattern and you plug it into Reb Meir would need gimel kolbonis. Because we said before, Reb Meir doesn't argue on the chachamim. He's machmer over and above the chachamim, and adds an extra kalboin because of the kazeh. So according to Reb Meir, you would need 3 kolbonis. Gimel kolbonis inam. Also Reb Yirmiyah, Reb Shmuel, Rav Yitzchak, the Shem Rab, Shloisha kolbonis inam. There's going to be 3 kolbonis according to Reb Meir. Echad shekel shu noisein, the echad shekel shu noitel, the echad is vartayra. So according to Rab, the way we would learn the machlokes is, according to Reb Meir, you would need 3 kolbonis, and according to the Chum, you need 2 kolbonos. And our Mishnah that says you need 2 kolbonos might also be going according to Reb Meir, but the Mishnah wants to say that l'chul alma it would be at least 2 kolbonos. Okay, zok the Gemara weiter. Achin v'ashutvin shechayovin bekalboin u'peturin mimaisha behema. So we were talking about in the Mishnah. There's a halacha by maisha behema that maisha behema of shutfim, behemoths of shutfim are not mechuyev in maisha behema. And the reason why they're not mechuyev in maisha behema, there's actually a pasuk. It says by Bechorish, kol peter sheger behema, asher yiyah lecha to you as an individual, and we might from there v'lo shel shutfis. So animals that belong to shutfim don't have a chiyav maisha. So therefore, if the estate is still in its original form, we look at it as if the father is still alive and it belongs to one person, it will be mechuyev ma'aser. But once the achen split up the Yerusha, even if they then partner up again, they're no different than any partners, and therefore they'll be part of a ma'aser behem.
That has a loan against any of his animals.
So now you're saying that a lien is shutfus. I don't know if you could say that. I don't know the answer. You might be right. But there's definitely a distinction. Whether or not a lien is considered shutvis, that's a different question. I always tell people, I don't own my house. The bank owns my house, right? But when I sell it and it goes up, I'm not going to share the benefits with the bank. So I'm not sure. Okay, so let's have a look at how this same scenario will impact the chiyuv to pay a kalboin. If it's still in the rishus of the father, if it's still in the rishus of the estate, then we look at it like the estate is paying the machzah shekel on behalf of the two independent children. Once again, one kalboin will be enough. However, actually, you don't need a kalboin at all. You don't need a kalboin at all because it's being paid for others. But if it's shutvis, then we're each paying for ourselves. Then, of course, we require the kalboin. So, therefore, there's an inverse relationship between the chiyuv of meiser and the chiyuv to give a kalboin. So the Gemara elaborates. If the achan and shutfin would be chayiv in a kalboin, which means it was split already, then upatur mi meiser behema. They will be part of a meiser behema. Zok Gemara, what's the case? B'shecholku v'chazru v'nishtatu. It means they've already split the Yerusha, so it's no longer in Tfusas Abayis, now it belongs to them individually. And even though they partner together, they're like two partners that got together, nothing to do with Yerusha. Therefore, they're chayiv in Kalboin, but they're positive from Ma'aser Behema. What about the other case offered in the Mishnah? Shechayavin b'Ma'aser Behema upeturim in a Kalboin. That's b'shalei chalku. If they never split up and the estate is still combined as a unit, therefore they'll be chayiv in Ma'aser Behema because there's not a shutfis. We look at it like it's still in the father's rishos, and they're positive from a Kalboin once again because we'll look at it like it's in the father's rishos and he's paying on their behalf. Amar Blazer, Behain Shechalku Gediyim Keneged Tiyashim or Tiyashim Keneged Gediyim. When do you say that if they combine forces again, they're considered a new partnership and it's not part of the original Tfusas Abayis? That's if when they split up, they didn't split everything equal in items. Rather, they just split it equal based on its value. So one brother might have taken the Gediyim and one brother might have taken the Tiyashim. They made sure that they each had an equal value, but they might have taken different things. So clearly, that's considered splitting up, because really, from the Yerusha itself, each brother should have 50% of every different type of thing that's there. The fact that one took Tiyashim and one took Gediyim, what's happening behind the scenes, the mechanics of that transaction is, I'm selling you my portion that I own in Tiyashim, and you're giving me your portion that you have in the Gediyim. So that's really how that transaction works behind the scene. That's the mechanics of the transaction. So in fact, we've purchased things from each other, and now it's a whole new partnership. However, but if everything was split exactly equal, then we say yesh breira. Reb Leizer holds yesh breira, and we say hu chelkoi mishar rishayna. We say that in fact the part that I own was always destined to be mine. That was mine, and whatever you have was yours. And therefore, when we join together, we're still considered back in the original domain because there was no transaction made, there was no exchange made at all. Rabbi Yochanan argues with Reb Leizer, and he holds you don't say breira. We also say you don't say breira, and therefore, they are considered like lakuches because there's less breira. There's no such thing as breira, and therefore you don't necessarily know that the gediyim that you got are always yours, and the gediyim that your brother got were always his. What you're doing by splitting up the gediyim is you're saying to each other, whatever I have in your gediyim, you can have, and you'll give me any ownership you have in my gediyim. So once again, it's like a new partnership, and therefore upatur min meiser. Therefore, there will be put like meiser. Tamon, like we learned. Halakuach, if you bought things, v'shenitin le b'matana, or if it was given to you b'matana, pater b'maiser behema, you're pater from maiser behema. Zok the Gemara. Reb Chia Amar, Reb Yirmiyah, boy. He asked the following question: the lama less nanamrinan, you only gave us in the Mishnah two options. If you're chayiv in maiser behema, you're pater on the Kalboin, and if you're chayiv in the Kalboin, you're pater on maiser behema. But there's two other options that the Mishnah could have illustrated. There's a way where they would be chayiv both on the Kalboin and on Ma'aser Behema. Upa'amim shehem patur mizeh mizeh. And there's actually an arrangement where they would be patur from both. And why weren't those mentioned? And what are those cases? Hey Chavida, how would that play out? And I'm going to skip the brackets. Cholku hanachosim v'loy cholku abehema. What if there were different assets? There were buildings, there were stocks, there were CDs. There were many different types of vehicles, of financial vehicles, and those were split. But the animals that were in the estate were not split. They kept it together. So then, come to choice that the animals are in tfusus abayis, which means they would be chayiv and meiser. It's not a shutvis, but all the money in the estate would be a shutvis, and therefore you would be chayiv on the kalboin, and you would be chayiv in meiser behema. Chayavim b'zeh ubezeh. Or on the flip side, if it's cholku abehema v'le cholkus nechosim, they kept all of the financial vehicles united, and they only split up the behemoths. So then peturim mizeh mizeh. Then they would be pater from meiser behema because it's shutvis, but they wanted to pay a kalboin because the money that's paying that kalboin is still united. So why didn't the Gemara offer these two options? The Gemara doesn't answer. Amar Rav Mona, how did that Amar? I just want you to know that we say that you'll be chayiv, to pay a kalboin if you split up the money, even though you didn't split up the behemoths. That's only b'shaloi hoisa behema roy. That's only if the behemoths were not roy with the assets. The estate could have been worth $100,000, and the animals are worth $20,000. Then you'll say that since you split up the money, you each have to pay your own kalboin. What if there's $90,000 worth of animals that were not split up, and there was $10,000 in financial vehicles that were split up? Then you look at it like the whole estate was not split up, and you still wouldn't have to give the kalboin, because you'll say, hey, the vast majority of the estate was not split up, so we don't look at it like it's a shutfus. Let's see what the Taklin Chadatin says. Even if they split the assets, but veloya behemoths, but not the babies, peturin mikalban, the basar rubas linon. You go basar roiv of the estate. Roiv of the estate was not split up, and therefore there would be pater on a kalban. Rav Avin Amar Rav Shami, I don't know how to pronounce this. Rav Shmi, does anybody have an art scroll? Rav Avin Amar Rav Shmaya, Rav Shami.
Shammai.
Shammai? So it's missing the aleph. Okay. Rav Avin Amar Rav Shammai, boy, he asked the following question. If Neisha Sisim Ka'odam Mechad Eitzel Meiser Behema, just because we consider it like one rishus, l'chumra, to be mechayiv Meiser Behema, when the assets were not split up, so now you're going to say at poiter min kalboin, you're going to pater him from the kalboin. And this sentiment was actually expressed when we learned the Mishnah. Somebody asked, I don't understand. The fact of the matter is, what do you mean? The father's not here. It belongs to the kids. They're paying their own kalboin. There's this magical thing because there's an estate, we should be pater from the kalboin. Just because you consider it one estate and you're mechayiv ma'aser behema, you can use that lakula and you're going to say that they're pater from a kalboin. Amar lei, he told him, Loy Shanya, it should be no different. Shehu noisin sela echad shlema. When you give one seller for two people, we're saying that you don't have to give an extra kalboin. So based on that, correct Rav Avin, Amar Rav Shami, mayata afilu choku v'chazu v'nishtatvu chayovim b'ma'aser behema u'peturim min kalboin. Minasvara. Why should there be this magical estate thing? If you're saying that when the estate is not split up, they're pater from a kalboin, well, then even if it was choku v'chazu v'nishtatvu, right now they're one. Why should they be chayiv the kalboin? And why should they be pater from meiser? But utaninan, the Mishnah doesn't agree with this sentiment, because the Mishnah says chayavin the kalboin. If it was split and then they rejoined, they would be chayiv in the kalboin u'peturim ma'aser behema. And there will be pater of ma'aser behema. The two dots in Yerushalmi doesn't mean anything. It's we're still in the middle of a sentence, and the two dots doesn't count. So Rava b'shem, maybe it's like a traffic light, but it's green. So you go right through. Rava b'shem Rav Ada bar Rav Huna says the reason why, if it was split up and then they came back together, we don't consider it one estate, and therefore they're part of a Ma'aser Behema and they're chayiv in a Kalboin. It's like Shnei Achim sheYorshu Savian, two brothers that yashin from their father and split up and then rejoin would be no different than Hishnei Gisin sheYorshu Chameyan. It would be like two brothers-in-law who they didn't yashin anybody. Their wives yashin, and they got it from their wives, and then they joined together. That's a completely new partnership. It's not at all considered part of the original Tfusas Abayis. So what Rabbah is saying is our Mishnah holds that once they do a split, even if they join together, it's like two completely independent parties that are making a new partnership. That's not Tfusas Abayis. And in fact, you're wrong by saying that joining together should replicate the original Tfusas Abayis. The original Tfusas Abayis is only there until they split up. Once they split, there is no way to recreate the original Tfusas Abayis. Zok the Gemara, Le'echan hoyu haKalbonis noifim. Who got these Kalbonis? You're supposed to give Maxis a shekel. That for this extra, what is this extra little bit of money? The 1/12th or 1/24th of a shekel. Exactly where does this money go to? It just gets added to the Shekalim. It gets added to the same pot. It goes for Karbanis Nadava. So it gets put in to a pot where they'll bring Karbanis Nadava. Now, Shimon Shazuri Aimer, what they used to do with this extra money is Rikuya, Zov, Vitzipoy, Lebeis Koyos HaKodesh. They would take these gold coins, or if they weren't gold, they would buy gold with it. And what they do with the gold is they hammer it down till it's a fine sheet, and then they use that fine sheet as plating for the walls inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So they had golden wallpaper. I'm sorry? No, it wore out. The walls wore out. They would have to fix them. That's why there were trapdoors in the attic above the Kodesh Kodeshim where they would drop down tradesmen to do repairs.
Yeah, but the gold doesn't wear out. The gold doesn't wear out.
I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it tarnishes. Maybe this. Maybe it deteriorates. I'm not sure. But Ben Azai says, you know who got it? The Beis Hamikdash didn't get it. We actually gave it to them. There's money exchangers. There's a lot of money exchangers that we bring. See, how did Trump do Operation Warp Speed? It wouldn't be worth it for so many companies to invest so much money so quickly in possibly creating a vaccine because it might not work out and they'll lose money. So Trump said, I promise you, you will be fully taken care of. You're guaranteed to make money on this. And therefore, they went all out to develop the vaccine. The same thing here. The shulchanin, there's only a certain amount of shulchanin that could make enough money by providing these services. But the Beis Hamikdash wanted there to be such a huge amount of shulchanin, so wherever you are, you'll have no problem getting the exchange to be able to give the shkolim, that they actually said, you'll keep all those kolbanos because that'll be the incentive for you to come here, even though you might not do enough business, but the kolbanos you'll get to keep, and therefore it'll be worth your while to come here and do business. Or maybe it was also to pay the shulchanim, but since we made them come to Yerushalayim and we made them sit by the Beis Hamikdash, it was to pay them to bring all those things. So let's see what it says. They had to bring all these shkolim to Yerushalayim. So that could be, it's not referring to shulchanias, maybe it's referring to people, maybe their contributions were made in individual cities, because we're going to learn there were shofars. The Mishnah told us there were shofars in individual cities. All that had to be transported to Yerushalayim at one point. So the Kalbonis might have paid for the transportation. But what happened is earlier on, the Shulchanim were all over the country. But then they were all, remember by Chaf Hey, we said that they were all sitting by the Beis Hamikdash. So all of the Shulchanim were asked to come from wherever they were in Israel to come to the Beis Hamikdash because they wanted to have a multitude of of money exchangers there, so it'll be easy for people to give the shkolim, so they have to be paid for that. So that's what the kolbanos were for. So you see, in fact, it's a shaila if these kolbanos were actually going to the Beis Hamikdash or not. Now, this clearly could only be according to the Chachamim, because according to Reb Meir, that the kolban is because of the Gezei Yitnu, you for sure would have to give it to the Beis Hamikdash.
All the Shekalim would be operating this as a mitzvah, this for free.
Well, that's why they were compensated. They were paid to come provide shulchani services at the Beis Hamikdash.
Outside the Kalboin.
Uh,
The mayor says the Kalboin went to Beis Hamikdash, yet the Shulchan had to get paid from other money.
Or maybe the kolbanos went to the Beis Hamikdash, and the Beis Hamikdash used it to pay them. That probably makes more sense.
So then it went back.
Right. So went to the Beis Hamikdash, and then the Beis Hamikdash paid these people so that they should come. That's a good point.
I just want to mention that in the New Testament, one of the most famous stories is that Yoshka overturned these shulchanias, okay, because he protested that there's business being done in front of the Beis Hamikdash. And he's considered in the New Testament a hero for doing so. Just interesting.
He was a liberal. He was a hero for
historical
ruining
point.
businesses.
Yeah.
So Vata, ruining businesses, it was considered a heroic act in those days. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay, gewaltig.
But the people reading this, the Christians reading this, don't understand that we're talking about the process of chatzi shekel, and it was an essential service. That
it was an essential service.
Yeah, right.
No quarantining for them. Usually, they still have this concept today. Because if you're by the Kaisel and the Mashiach comes over to you and he asks you for money and you want to give him a shekel and you have a 10 shekel coin and you ask him for change 9 shkolim, you often only get 8 shkolim back because they also charge the Kalboin. So the minig is continuing. Okay. Hadron Allah perak echad ba'adar b'neder hadron Allah perak echad ba'adar hadron Allah perak echad ba'adar. Zogt Heilige Mishnah. Mistarfen shkolim l'darkonis. Now imagine what it would take to transport the multitude of small denomination coins to Yerushalayim. It would be very expensive. So because of that, they would transfer them into golden coins. And I believe it was like the Archbishop of Cheshbon, I think it was like 4 coins. I think it was 4 or maybe 8 matzah shekels would be 1 dar coin. It drastically reduced the bulk. So it was much easier to ship. Why? Because it'll reduce the cost and the difficulty of transporting the shkolim from all around up to Yerushalayim. Zok the Mishnah weiter. Kishem shahayu shofars b'mikdash, just like there were shofars in the Beis Hamikdash, meaning pushkas, and it was called a shofar because the pushka was narrow at the top, so you couldn't get your hands into it, only to drop the money in, and wide at the bottom. So like a pushka, there's a slot, can't get your hand in. Slot at the top, but it was wider at the bottom. The same way they had these pushkas to contribute to Machzah Shekel in the Beis Hamikdash, Kachal Yushayfers Medina. They also had in all the individual cities for people to give their Machzah Shekel. There was like a pushka in every city where you could contribute. Similar to Kupat Ha'ir. Wherever you go, there's an opportunity to contribute to Kupat Ha'ir. A city took their pushka, the municipal authority hired a courier to transport the shkolim of their city to the Beis Hamikdash, and on the way, the nignavu oisha of the shluchim, the shluchim claim that they were robbed or that they were stolen. So we know that a shemer chinam is pater on geneva v'aveda, which means there's no shkolim. So the halach is im nitrim hatruma, if the Beis Hamikdash had already taken the trumas alishka, meaning this transportation occurred after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and then it was stolen. We say that, like we said earlier as well, that when they make the Trumas Alishka, it's on behalf of all of the Shkolim everywhere, even though they haven't arrived yet. So therefore, we're going to say that these Shkolim are already in the Rishus of the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, we don't have to, as a city, we don't have to contribute another set of coins. It's Hektish that lost. So Hektish is the Baal Dover. Hektish is the one who has a claim against these shluchim. So therefore, Nishboinlik is burned. they'll swear to the Gizbar, I'm a Shomer Chinam, it was Nignevoish Avdu, and therefore I'm potter to pay, and then Hektish has to suffer the loss. Vimlav, but if the Truma wasn't done yet, which means these coins are still in the possession of the city, so it's the city who lost money, so now it's the city that's going to have to replenish those coins, so it's the city who has the entire with the Shliach, Nishboin Levnei Yair, they would swear to the Bnei Yair. And then Bnei Yair, Sheiklin Tachtem, the Bnei Yair would now have to provide another set of coins. What happens if Nimtzu Oisha Hechzirim Haganovim? What if they ended up finding these coins, or whoever stole them decided to give them back? Then Elu Velu Shkolim, you don't refund back to the taxpayer the Shkolim. No, they both remain as Shkolim. They both go to the Beis Hamikdash. However, and not only that, you might think, okay, I have a credit balance if I overpay my taxes, so that I have a credit balance for next year, which I can use against my next year's tax bill. No, it doesn't work that way. It won't work. It's a loss to the city. We sent it with Shluchim, but there was no Tumas Alishka done yet. And it got lost or stolen before that point. So therefore, we lost and we have to provide another set of coins. Correct, Gemara, I don't understand. You're transferring it into gold to make it less bulky. Why don't you make it even less bulky? The Yasois and Margolios. Why don't you make it into diamonds, and then with a small little pouch, you can contain the value of all the shkolim, and then it's much easier. So tomorrow, because that's a commodity, Shema Tazal Hamargolios, we're afraid that the value will drop. The Nimta Heklish Mafsit, Kahidi Tanin Taman, just like we learned, Buchulam Niftin the Kesef, Ubishava Kesef. All things you could be paida, in the ben and the other things in the opinion, you could be paida with Kesef, Ubishava Kesef. Chut Mishkolim, Shkolim, you cannot be paida with Shava Kesef. And the Aiden paida in Bekalim. Shkolim, you can't be paida with Kalim either. Once again, because the value of the Kalim that you will buy with the Shkolim might drop in value. The Nimta Heklish Mafsit. Afachanami Shemetaz Lamargolios, the Nimta Heklish Mafsit. Zok to Gemara. The Mishnah that says that there was a shofar in every city for people to make their contribution, that's B'taklan Chadatin. If you're giving for this year and you're on time, you didn't miss the deadline, that's what you could put into the pushka in your local city. If you didn't give last year and now you want to pay up, you can't put it into the pushka in your city. Loibida. You have to actually go to Yerushalayim, because the only place where they have pushkas where you can pay up for last year are in Yerushalayim itself. The Tani came, and we learned like this: Atikin b'Mikdash, there were pushkas for last year's Shekalim in the Beis Hamikdash. Vein Atikin b'Medina, but not in the Medina. Zaktamor Masnisim b'Shamechina. The Mishnah tackle na Shekalim. Masnisim b'Shamechina. The Mishnah is speaking about a Shamechinam, right? That's why Nignavu or Sha'avdu they're potter, because a Shamechinam is potter on Geneva Vaveda. Aval b'Shomer Socher. But if it was a Shomer Socher, then even if it was stolen or lost, there's no loss to Hektish. There's no loss to the city, because the Shomer Socher has to pay that out of his pocket. Aval b'Shomer Socher loy b'da. It wouldn't be that way. Rab Abba wants to argue and say V'afil b'Shomer Socher.
Doesn't he have to give a shvua that it was stolen? I mean, he may not be responsible.
He has to swear. Sure, he has to swear.
Okay, so if he swears, then he's potter after that from paying.
The Shomer Socher?
Isn't he?
No, a Shomer Socher is chayiv on Geneva Veda. He's only potter on an oinus.
On an oinus. So if it's stolen, it's not an oinus?
No, Geneva Veda is not considered an oinus.
So why should he? Are you sure about that?
100% sure.
Okay, doesn't seem logical. Okay.
Vafilu Tamar,
we switched from a shomer. Just to be clear, we switched from a shomer chinam to a shomer sacher here. So it's talking about shomer sacher.
It's potter Geneva Veda, but a Shomer Sacher is chayiv. So Zok Gemara, maybe you could even say it's a Shomer Sacher, but the Geneva could have been an oinus. Nignevu b'lista mezuyin. Maybe what the Mishnah means when it says Nignevu is not a standard theft, it's armed robbers. Armed robbers is an oinus, and the Shomer Sacher would be potter for such a theft. Or Avdu is commission kavas for nasam yam. It doesn't mean he lost it carelessly. It means his ship sunk.
That's what I was talking
about. Even the Shomer Sacher would be potter.
Okay, that's what I was talking about.
But I do want to add that
it's
if you're a Shomer Sacher,
due to no fault of his own, basically.
That's right. That's right. Then he's putter.
Okay,
Right. There's no negligence involved. But I do want to add that if you're a Shomer Sarcha and you fall asleep, you're putter. That's called an oinus. That I know. Because when I was davening for the Amid, when I was in Abel in Philadelphia, Meyer was 9:45, and I took a nap once at 7 o'clock, and at 10 to 10, there's a bang on my door and says the whole yeshiva is waiting for you since 9:45 for Meyer. So I jumped out of bed like a bat out of hell. I never ran so fast in my life. And don't worry, I still finished Meyer by 10. You don't have to worry about that. But right after Meyer, the two Rosh Yeshivas made a beeline to the Amud, and they asked me, "What was to come in?" So I said, "I fell asleep." So Abshul said, "No, oineshina, Asher Mesachar Dach Potter." So I didn't get beaten up for it. Zog to Gemara weiter. Amar Rabbi Yosy bar Simon. I'll never forget the oineshina. Amar Rabbi Yosy bar Simon. Asher command the Amar Harmin Alagovi Vala also the Ligvois. Of course, you have to say, being that we're saying that once there was Trumas Alishka, it's the Hekdash's problem. That's only according to the Shita who holds that when they make the Trumas Alishka, it's representing not only the coins that are actually there present, but all the coins that were already contributed. However, Baram Commandomer in Tarmin Loyal Agovoi, but if you hold that when they make the Trumas Alishka, they don't include that, then in fact these coins still belong to the city, and therefore it's the city's loss. And I guess we could stop here. Shkoyach.
yeah,
Shkoyach. Wonderful.
Now we don't have money changes today, and we have.
We do have money changes today.
Only different currency. I have money changes in some currency. You go into the bank. Right?
Everybody in shul is that. Could you have changed it with 20?
You go to the bank, you want 50 or 100. They don't take a Kalboin.